This one or this one? If you're trying to get on Wi-Fi, I think it says SDSU. Yes. I think this is the password. So let me in 2018. Thank you so much for capital L. If that's not working, I will have to go after I introduce our speaker. I'll go and figure out the Wi-Fi here. So we are recording these sessions using Zoom. There's a camera in the room. It's basically picking up our speaker, a little bit of the front row. And so afterwards, you can view the recordings as well, share them with your friends, family, colleagues. And even during the day, if you're thinking there's somebody who might want to join us remotely, I can give you the Zoom code. They could actually come in and view live online. So I'm Rebecca Frazee. I didn't get to introduce myself in there. I teach. I'm actually a graduate of this program, and I have some student colleagues from the program visiting. And I teach in the program. This semester I'm teaching the introductory course, LDT 540, Introduction to Educational Technology. And so I'm looking forward to meeting and talking with many of you today. I'll introduce our speaker, Tanya Goyette, and she can tell you a little bit more about herself, just to see about her presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tanya Goyette, and I'm very happy to be here. I am actually also a graduate of the program a long time ago. I can imagine you probably came here today to learn about mixed realities and education, e-learning tips, maybe something about cannabis and design. I'm excited about that. And maybe even meet some new friends and hook up with some old ones. You might even be curious about what I do as a senior technical training specialist at Qualcomm, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. We're actually going to learn some techniques shared by the world's greatest communicators. These men and women are masters of communication, and they've taken the TED stage to present their ideas around the world. So let me ask you this. Does anyone know what TED stands for?
Technology, education, design.
Yeah, that's right. Technology, education, design. So has anyone seen more than one TED Talk? Raise their hand. Great, so you're pretty familiar. So if you're not familiar, would anybody like to share what a TED Talk is? I've seen one. Okay. Well, it's big. Go ahead.
Generally, a short talk, sometimes as short as 5 minutes, sometimes as long as a half an hour, that explains an innovative concept that needs to be propagated because it's so amazing and fascinating.
Correct. Yeah. So if you haven't already, go on the TED.com website and check out. They have all different TED Talks. So what I thought we would do today is see how these people do it on stage. And I was very inspired by this book. It's called Talk Like TED. And it kind of breaks down the 9 secrets of TED speakers giving presentations. And it's very applicable to what we do as educators, as presenters, as instructional designers, anyone else in the field. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through the 9 secrets, and I hope you can learn something from them. Okay, so this is Aimee Mullins, and she has 12 pairs of legs. So like most people, she was born with 2 legs, but due to a genetic condition, she had both her legs amputated before the age of 1. So instead of seeing herself as disabled, she decided at a young age to see prosthetic limbs as a superpower. So she used her superpower to break 3 world records in track and field, and she's also a fashion model, and she's a speaker as well. So she wanted to kind of redefine how people with disabilities look. She used the power of the TED stage to, as a launch pad to challenge innovators, designers, artists to come up with different ways of looking up at prosthetic limbs. So when she goes on a TED stage, she puts on a pair of prosthetics that makes her 6'1". So when she's out and about walking around Manhattan, she's wearing more comfortable prosthetics. So she's looking at it as something different than what it typically is made to be. So the first tip is unleash the master from within. So what she did is she took her passion about trying to redefine how people look at other people with disabilities, and she turned that into something positive. She's making a difference in the world. So yeah, dig deep inside of yourself and figure out what your passion is. And that's how you can make a better connection with your topic if you're speaking about it. Okay. Secret number 2 is tell stories that reach people's hearts and minds. We all know a good story when we see one. Think about your favorite movies and how telling a story can be applied to education and training. Brain scans reveal that stories stimulate and engage the human brain, helping the speaker connect with the audience and making it much more likely that the audience is going to remember and retain information. So kind of think about what stories you can include in your next presentation or content development. So yeah, if you think about it, every great story has a hero and a villain. So for a business presentation, telling stories is like a virtual equivalent of taking people on a field trip, helping them experience the content in a much more profound way. So the villain might be a challenge facing a business or an industry. The hero or the protagonist might rise to the occasion to meet that challenge. And finally, the townspeople or the customers, in this case, are freed from the villain and everyone lives happily ever after. So that's just one way that you could use storytelling when you're building content, especially in e-learning. It works very well to think of things as a storyline. So has anyone heard of the 10,000-hour rule? Yeah. So maybe explain what that is.
10,000 hour means if you are fresh, a new one in one field, or if you want to master a new skill, you need to spend 10,000 hours to master it.
Yes. So yes, it takes a expert. Yeah, to be the expert, yes. Right? Yeah. So you see pianists that they've worked many hours perfecting their craft, and that's basically what it takes to be an expert in the field. So the third tip is have a conversation. So when you're presenting something like I am now, have a conversation with like you're having with a friend when you're presenting. So you practice. So as you're developing content, or even as a teacher, getting up in front and sharing, what your ideas are in front of a group of people is really important practice. And also, don't forget about body language and nonverbal skills. So one of my favorite TED Talks is by this social psychologist at Harvard Business School. Her name is Aimee Mullins. I don't know, has anyone seen her TED Talk on nonverbal communication? Well, check it out, it's really good. So she says how we use our bodies can change people's perceptions of us. So if you want, just stand up for a moment. And we're going to do something that she calls a power pose. So basically, if you don't hit the person next to you, but stand out or put your hands up, just stand like this. Good. So if you stand like this for 2 minutes, which you can sit down now, it lowers the cortisol levels in your brain, and it can raise testosterone. So before you go into a job interview, and I've done this before, you just go into the restroom and you do your power stance pose for 2 minutes. And it really helps you in those high pressure situations. So she says in her TED Talk, don't fake it until you make it. Fake it until you become it. So this can be very powerful advice for anyone doing public speaking or in education. Just remember that your delivery, your gestures, mastered through hours of practice and skill, can really help you enhance your overall message. So the next secret is at the root of many conundrums. How do you teach something and make it stick? So the secret is to reveal information in a completely new and refreshing way. So package it differently. So a lot of your favorite movies, they're the same storyline, but they're told in a different way, right? If you think about it. So why does it work to take this approach? The human brain thinks of novelty as something unusual or an unfamiliar element in a presentation, and it will jolt the brain, and you're more likely to learn something that's novel and new. So Martha Burns, she's an adjunct professor at Northwestern University, and she believes that neuroscience can help educators become better teachers. So she explains that we get a buzz out of learning something new, and it activates the same reward center in the brain as drugs or gambling does, if you can imagine that. So there's a little chemical in the brain that's released when someone is experiencing something new, and that's dopamine. And dopamine allows them to retain the information. And when we're in a new relationship with someone, or when we advance to the next level in a video game, that is when your brain releases dopamine. So when you're developing like an e-learning module and you gamify it, that's a perfect example of having a way to help your viewers retain that information and make a connection with it. So the best teachers, are always looking for ways of making information novel and new and exciting. So lastly, you'll be a more interesting person if you're interested in learning and sharing ideas from fields that are much different from your own. So as an instructional designer, I've noticed that people that are drawn to this field and that are part of the program, they come from all walks of life, and they really bring their experiences with them. So like I was a film major and I'm a pilot. So I use those things on my job now to make different connections in a new and exciting way. So think about that in your career. The next secret is to deliver jaw-dropping moments. So let me tell you a little story about Bill Gates. So of course he's the founder of Microsoft, but he also founded the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So he knows that the brain doesn't pay attention to boring things. So he was at a conference with some of the biggest leaders in the tech industry, and he brought out this glass jar on stage, and he said, "Malaria is spread by mosquitoes. I brought some here, and I'll let them kind of, mill around." So he opened the jar, and he let the mosquitoes out, and he said, there's no reason why only poor people can be affected by malaria. And then he said, just kidding. These mosquitoes do not have malaria, but he just wanted to make a point, right? And that was a very powerful statement. So these investors in the room, he actually raised quite a bit of money for one of his causes, which is to fight malaria in third world countries. And so jaw-dropping moments like this can really help make the information stick too, because you're going to walk away today and you're going to remember the story about Bill Gates, right? So in marketing, we call mosquitoes the hook. So it's the wow factor that grabs your attention and makes you want more. So it's these moments that what scientists call emotionally charged events. And that's when the brain detects an emotionally charged event. It also releases dopamine into the system. So it's another way to retain information, new information. So in his book, the author asks, what's the first thing you should do when creating a PowerPoint presentation? I feel like most people, you open PowerPoint, right? But what he says is that you should create your story first, kind of tapping into the senses, figuring out ways that you can see, touch, feel your content, and then PowerPoint is just the tool, or Articulate is the tool that you're using to convey your story. You can also use props if you're delivering content in front of a live class. One of the TED Talk speakers actually brought a human brain on stage with her. You can also use shocking statistics. Like 1 in 100 regular people are psychopaths. So if there's 1,500 people in a room, that means that 15 of you are psychopaths. So this was a statistic that was given by a TED Talk by John Ronson. And so I've used this technique in some of my export compliance training. So I've talked about the millions of dollars in fines that a company had to pay, not our company, but a company had to pay for violating export regulations. And then I also talked about how many years of jail an individual had to go through for doing the same thing, violating export laws, working for a company. So those are the things that kind of make people stand up and pay attention. So according to the author of this book, the most popular TED Talks it goes to Sir Ken Robinson on why schools kill creativity. So it's been viewed more than 15 million times, and why is it so popular? So he actually combines humor and novelty in his TED Talk. So that's secret number 6 is wherever you can, you add a little humor to your presentation. The brain loves humor, so it lowers your defenses, and it makes audiences more receptive to your message. And it also makes you seem more likable too, as a presenter. So a lot of TED Talkers, they use anecdotes, observations, or personal stories, and they elicit a lot of laughs from the audience. So you could do that through video or through analogies, metaphors, quotes, and photos. So it's kind of a risky way to go, but if you have a little bit of courage, add humor to your training content and in an authentic way, and it can really make a big difference. All right, so I've been developing at Qualcomm 8-hour instructor-led training for years. Sometimes it's 5-day, 8-hour-a-day training. So that, to be honest, that works for our environment because we have engineers that come in maybe for an hour to learn the piece of information that they need to know, and then they leave. But technically, 18 minutes or less is the golden number of how long you want to make your training. So like an e-learning module for me, I don't make it more than 10 minutes because otherwise you kind of lose people's attention. So according to researchers, cognitive backlog or too much information prevents the success of the transference of ideas. So listening is a very exhaustive activity on the brain. So that's why I'm probably going to keep our presentation to 18 minutes today. So the other point that the author of the book brings up is that constraints are keys to a creative presentation. So how on earth do you condense, like a 5-hour training into 18 minutes? You have to come up with some creative ideas on how to do that. And when you have those constraints, that's where your creativity kind of flows. There's also the magic number 7. So if you think about a phone number and it has 7 digits, So that's the maximum number of bits of information that a person can remember. You probably are learning that through some of your adult learning theory research. So long story short, what isn't there makes things even stronger. So that's something to think about. So when you deliver presentations, you want to do it with components that touch more than one of the senses. So sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. So, you know, a lot of these things you can't really pull off, like smell, for example. It's kind of hard to do when you're delivering a presentation. But the brain doesn't, again, pay attention to boring things. So if you build a presentation full of memorizing images, captivating videos, intriguing props, and beautiful words, your audience is really going to respond to it. So we know from adult learning theory that there are multiple ways to learn. So Dr. Richard Mayer, who's a professor of psychology at UC Santa Barbara, he's the principal proponent of multimedia learning. So in his experiments, students who were exposed to multisensory environments, text, pictures, animation, and video, always, not sometimes, but always had a much more accurate recall of information than those students that did not. So when the brain is allowed to build two mental representations of an explanation, a verbal model and a visual model, the mental connections are not just a little stronger, they're a lot stronger. So just remember that when you're developing training. So how does this translate into what we do as content developers? In presentation slides, Gallo suggests using pictures instead of text whenever possible. So I know in what I do, we do very technical content with a lot of bullet points, but in most TED Talk presentations, there's not more than 40 words in the whole presentation. It's usually mostly images or graphics or video content. So try to use visual rather than text if you can. And if you think about Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, if he were just to stand up and just to state all these statistics about climate change, you're not really going to get it. But when he shows pictures of, you know, what's happening with the CO2 levels rising drastically over a certain period of time, or the ice caps melting, those images are going to be burned in your brain, and you're going to walk away understanding what he's trying to say and actually believing him more than, you know, if he were to stand up and just talk to you. So cluttered slides, they kind of distract from the message. If we only hear information, we're only likely to remember 10% of that information 3 days later. But if you add a picture, just one picture, that recall goes up by 65%. So the bottom line is, you know, add images and background images, like pie charts, tables, graphs, whatever. Just stick with 40 words or less in the first 10 slides, and kill the bullet points if you can. Once you force yourself to eliminate these words, you'll realize how much fun that you can have with your presentation, and it'll be more exciting and engaging. All right, the last tip that Gallo offers is to be authentic, open, and transparent. If you try to be something you're not, you're going to fail to gain the trust of your audience. So you can learn from how others achieve success in presenting, but you'll never make a lasting impression on people unless you leave your own mark. So Oprah Winfrey had a great response to a woman that came up to her and said, "Someday I want to be like Oprah Winfrey." She said, "No, you don't." She said that people should identify what lane they should be in and stay in their lane. She said that successful people identify their life's core purpose and relentlessly follow that purpose to become the best representation of themselves that they can become. So when you deliver a presentation, the goal shouldn't be deliver a presentation. It should be to inspire your audience, to move them, and to encourage them to dream bigger. So now I've covered the 9 secrets of some of the world's most powerful communicators who graced the TED stage. And whether you're a teacher or you're an inspiring e-learning developer or instructional designer or a public speaker, whatever you are, be a good one. So, are there any questions? And you can always ask me things in between section 2 about what I do at Qualcomm as well. So, all right, thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, that would be my question. How did you plan it so perfectly? We started late, but you ended perfectly.
So I have announcement about lunch. Lunch is now here in conference room, 350.